You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I have to start with the Texans releasing J.J. Watt. That is official. He is a free agent. Let the fire sale commence. I don't care what the Texans say. I don't care what Nick Caserio says, what Cal McNair says, what Jack Easterby says. This is the start of a major rebuild for the Texans. You don't cut a franchise icon if you're not going on a major rebuild. The alternative is that they really think they're better without J.J. Watt. And if they really think that, they're more delusional than I thought they were. And they were already incredibly dysfunctional. You want to tell me that this move saves the Texans $17.5 million? Watt's not getting any younger. There are good football reasons for this move? No, there aren't. J.J. Watt stayed healthy last year. It's something that's been an issue with him. His last 5 years in the league, only last year in 2018 did he play over 600 snaps. He had an 85.5 overall grade, according to Pro Football Focus. Of all the edge rushers in the NFL to play over 100 snaps, Watt had the 7th best grade. This guy is still producing at a high level. Now, I'll say this. I do think Watt is a little overrated. Just a little bit. Not a lot. Just a little. People say that he's one of the best defensive players in the NFL, like he was when he was getting over 15 sacks a season. No, he's not. He's not better than Khalil Mack. He's not better than Aaron Donald. He's not better than T.J. Watt, Joey Bosa, Myles Garrett, DeMarcus Lawrence, Chase Young, Cameron Jordan. He's not at that elite level. He's still really, really good. But he's not elite anymore. But that's okay. Just because Watt, at the age of 31, took a little bit of a step back, didn't fall off a cliff, just took a little bit of a step back, doesn't mean he's chopped liver. He's still producing. He's still a great player. He was the second best player that the Texans had. The guy's a future Hall of Famer. We really don't think of him in that sense, but he is. 5-time Pro Bowler, 5-time All-Pro, recorded double-digit sacks in 5 seasons. When Watt was younger, he was insanely dominant. Don't kid yourself, he was in that Reggie White, Bruce Smith, even Lawrence Taylor tier of dominance. But more than that, though, just the extracurricular stuff he's done, becoming an incredible member of the Houston community. After the Sandy Hook shooting, Watt reached out to some of the families that just so happened to be in Houston. He dressed up as Batman for a Halloween party at the Texas Children's Hospital. The guy raised over $37 million to help the city of Houston recover after Hurricane Harvey. No, there is no good reason to release J.J. Watt unless you're going on a fire sale. And I don't mind that. I don't mind the Texans saying, you know what, we're going to rebuild. It's not what we want to do, but it's what we have to do. That's perfectly fine. That's okay. But it begs the question, why'd you cut him? Why didn't you try to trade him? You're telling me you couldn't get anything for J.J. Watt? I mean, it is an interesting thought experiment. What would you be willing to give up for J.J. Watt? You wouldn't give up a first. You probably wouldn't give up a second. Maybe a third? The guy's going to be 32 years old at the start of the next NFL season. To cut him, rather than try to trade him, is weird. It is a classy move by the Texans, because what it does is it gives Watt the power to pick his own team. If a bad team like the Jaguars or the Eagles or the Jets made the best offer for Watt, if you're Nick Caserio, you'd be hard-pressed to turn that down. Now look, can you say these are the teams that Watt wants to go to? I'm only going to negotiate with these teams? Sure. And that's a classy way to go about it. I mean, that would go a long way towards salvaging the Texans' reputation. You've got to realize they're kind of toxic right now. You've got DeAndre Hopkins killing the team after they give him away. Watt's gone. Watson's going to go. The Texans can say that they're not going to trade Deshaun Watson. They're going to trade Deshaun Watson. There's no way on this earth that they can't trade Deshaun Watson. But I'll say this. By cutting Watt and giving him the power to pick his own team and sign the best contract possible with that team, that's a classy move by the Texans. It's not the smartest move from a football sense, but it is a classy move. And that does mean something. Because again, the Texans' name is mud right now. It does bring up an interesting question, though. Where is Watt gonna go? I don't see him signing with the highest bidder. That doesn't make any sense to me. Watt has already made a ton of money. Over $100 million when you factor in his rookie contract, and the big extension that he signed after that. Plus, he hosts Ultimate Tag on Fox with his brothers, TJ Watt and Derek Watt. He doesn't need more money. He has more than enough. What he does need is a ring. Because even though I think Watt is a future Hall of Famer, there are going to be some people who say he only had 1 4-year stretch of dominance, got hurt, had 1 great year, and then that was it. In terms of dominance, Watt was linked to those guys I mentioned before, Smith, White, and Taylor. But when you really look at Watt's career, and you boil it down to the ground, he doesn't have the sustained dominance that those guys had. That could hurt him in the eyes of the voters. Realize Jared Allen didn't get into the Hall of Fame this year. Allen and Watt have had similar careers. But what probably kept Allen out of the Hall of Fame this year, I'm not saying he's going to be out forever, but what kept him out this go-round is his lack of a Super Bowl ring. If Watt gets a Super Bowl ring, how do you keep him out? 50 years from now, how do you not look back at Watt's career with a Super Bowl ring and not say this guy was one of the best defensive players of all time? He's going to go ring chasing. And off the top of my head, there are only 2 teams that he can go to. There may be others. I need to really think about it. But as of right now, these are the 2 teams that I think have the best shot of signing J.J. Watt. The Green Bay Packers and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Watt grew up in Wisconsin. He went to college at the University of Wisconsin. Don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure he grew up a Packers fan. I understand that the Packers need to add pass catchers more than they need to add defensive players. But the Packers didn't have a great defensive line last year outside of Kenny Clark. They got good production out of unheralded guys, but J.J. Watt would go a long way towards making that defensive line elite. Also, in goal-to-go situations, I really like the idea of Aaron Rodgers throwing to J.J. Watt. That makes me very, very happy. The Steelers, it's an obvious connection. His brothers play there. They don't have an obvious fit for Watt. But I know that family is very important to him. I think he'd be very intrigued by playing with the Steelers. If I had to put money on it, though, as much as I'd love him on the Jets do need to add a defensive end. I don't think it's in the cards for them to get Watt. I think he's going to be a Green Bay Packer. If I had to put money on it, next year, Watt's going to be a Packer. And I do just want to reiterate this. Deshaun Watson will be traded. Watt being cut all but guarantees that. I don't care what the Texans say. I don't care what anyone else says. You don't cut J.J. Watt and then keep Deshaun Watson. That makes no sense. Either try to put together a playoff team in a pretty open AFC South. The Colts don't have a quarterback. The Jaguars aren't going to go worst to first. And the Titans aren't world beaters. Or rebuild. Watt being cut signals to me that the Texans are going to rebuild. I don't begrudge them for that. It's really the only thing they can do. If Deshaun Watson could be any more ticked off with the Texans, he is now. Because I know him and Watt got along very, very well. There is no way that Watson opens up the season as a Houston Texan. Jeremy Fowler of ESPN said today that Watson likes the idea of going to the Broncos or the 49ers, not necessarily the New York Jets. I don't buy that. I'm not saying he's not intrigued by the Broncos or the Niners. It makes sense for him to want to go there. I don't buy the notion that he doesn't want to go to the Jets. From everything we've heard, he likes the idea of playing for Robert Saleh. And there are rumblings that he could try to recruit Allen Robinson to go to the Jets with him. I truly believe that Deshaun Watson will be a Jet next year. And that's not wishful thinking from a deluded Jets fan. That's what I truly believe. You know me well enough to know that I don't shy away from criticizing my teams. But I really think the stars have aligned for Deshaun Watson to become a Jet. Is it going to cost an arm and a leg? Probably. But nothing would make me happier than to see Watson in green. The Jets would finally have a franchise quarterback. There were a couple other NFL players that got cut. None as great as Watt, but still worth talking about. The first guy is Kamalei Correa. And I don't mind the Jaguars cutting him. The guy had a really bad year last year for the Titans and Jaguars. Only a 46.8 overall grade according to Pro Football Focus. I remember liking the signing when it was first announced that Correa was going to go back to the Titans. I did like him coming out of Boise State in 2016. I did think he was a solid backup linebacker. The reality is you can do a lot better than him. Something tells me he's not long for the NFL. He's still only 26. It's not impossible for him to turn his career around, but I'm not overly confident that he can do it. I don't think Correa is long for the NFL. I don't mind the Jaguars cutting him. Moving on now to the Raiders cutting Tyrell Williams. And this was long expected. Williams missed the whole season last year. He didn't opt out or anything. He just tore a labrum in his shoulder. By cutting him, the Raiders saved $10.6 million. And the Raiders are in cap hell. According to overthecap.com, even with Williams being cut, they're still over $8 million above the cap. The Raiders are going to make more moves. You can't begrudge the Raiders for making this move. It makes perfect sense. It was long expected. The only thing I'll say is I do think Williams is going to land on his feet. He is a talented player. Solid outside receiver. Not great. But in terms of being your second or third receiver, depending on who your slot receiver is, you can do worse than Tyrell Williams. I do expect him to sign a 1-year prove-it deal. Also, it's his birthday today, so happy birthday. That's a nice gift. Your pink slip. Hey, we know it's your birthday. Here's this envelope. Oh, great. What's in it? Your notice. Only the NFL. Alright, now I'll give you some MLB Valk talk. And I'll start with the Tigers signing Nomar Mazara to a 1-year deal worth $1.75 million. And this is a good move for the Tigers. It makes perfect sense. This isn't like the Royals adding Benintendi. The Tigers didn't give up any prospects to get him. All it cost the Tigers to get Mazara was cash. And not even a lot of cash. $1,750,000. Mazara is definitely a bounce-back candidate for this coming season. He's usually a guy who you can expect to hit 20 homers with a .260 average. Last year, in the 60-game joke, he only had .228 with 1 home run and 15 RBIs. It's hard for me to read too much into that. I like Mazara. I think Mazara is a solid player. Certainly not the great player that we thought he could be before the 2016 season, but still, he's a solid player. You can do a lot worse than having him patrol right field. I mean, I'll say this. A Tigers outfield from left to right, Victor Reyes, Jacoby Jones, and Nomar Mazara actually sounds pretty good to me. I'm not saying the Tigers are going to make a lot of noise this year. They stink. They're going to be lucky to get 60 wins. But at least they have a good outfield, and they can flip Mazara at the deadline for a prospect. There's a good move for the Tigers. It makes perfect sense. Moving on now to the Red Sox, signing Marwin Gonzalez to a 1-year deal worth $3 million. And this is a good move by the Red Sox. As much as it kills me to say that, this makes sense for him. I really like Gonzalez. Super utility guy. He's played every position in the majors except pitcher and catcher. So for the Red Sox to have Gonzalez as a super utility guy makes perfect sense. I'm not sure if he's going to start. It's certainly possible. But Gonzalez is better as a super utility guy. In 2019, he hit .264 with 15 homers and 55 RBIs. Last year, he hit .211 with 5 home runs and 22 RBIs. In a perfect world, Gonzalez is a super utility guy. This move makes sense for the Red Sox. It's always good to bring in a super utility guy like Gonzalez. But it certainly doesn't negate the fact that Red Sox fans saw Mookie Betts and Andrew Benintendi two guys who won a World Series with them in 2018 get traded in consecutive off seasons. And God only knows what's going to happen with Jackie Bradley Jr. There's some rumors that he could go to the Mets. There's some rumors that he could go back to the Red Sox. There are rumors that he wants a big contract. I'll tell you right now, I don't want Jackie Bradley Jr. I don't want any team to sign Jackie Bradley Jr. to a big contract. Here's what you do. You sign him to a 1-year deal as your backup outfielder / designated pinch runner. That's all Jackie Bradley Jr. is good for. I don't like Jackie Bradley Jr. I don't think he's a good player. If he really wants a gargantuan contract, run for the hills. Moving on now to the Phillies signing Brad Miller to a 1-year deal worth anywhere from $3 million to $3.5 million. And this is a good move for the Phillies. Miller is a good utility infielder. In 2016, he hit 30 home runs. Everyone forgets that. He's the kind of guy who, when he comes up in pinch hitting situations, you've got to respect as the opposing pitcher. In 2019, he hit 260 with 13 homers and 25 RBIs. Last year, he had 232 with 7 home runs and 25 RBIs. As much as I love Ronald Torreyes, and believe me, I do, very good utility infielder for the Yankees once upon a time, Miller offers a lot more power than Torreyes. This contract is more than fair. I don't care if it's for $3.5 million. Hell, I don't care if it's for $4 million. It makes sense for the Phillies to bring in Miller for a second time. The NL East is going to be a dogfight this year. I do think the Braves and Mets are going to finish 1-2. But it wouldn't stun me if a team like the Phillies came out of nowhere and got into the playoffs. It wouldn't surprise me if the Nationals got into the playoffs. They won the last legitimate World Series. Yes, last year's World Series does have an asterisk on it. 60 games. The Marlins made the playoffs last year. I understand 60 games, but they still got there. For a team like the Marlins, that means something. They could go on a crazy run. The NL East is wide open this year. The two most wide open divisions in baseball. The NL East and the AL West. There's no doubt about that. Speaking of the AL West, the Athletics made a trade. They traded Sheldon Noisy and Gus Varland to the Dodgers for Adam Kolarek and Cody Thomas. I'll start by breaking down Kolarek because he's the most established guy out of this foursome. He's a very underrated reliever. One of the most underrated relievers in the game. In 2019, he went 6-3 with a 3.27 ERA. Last year, he went 3-0 with a .95 ERA. In fact, with the Dodgers in 2019, he went 2-0 with a .77 ERA. Not a good playoff pitcher, but in the regular season, in the second biggest media market, In America, Kolarek was lights out. He's going to help the Athletics a lot. Liam Hendriks and Yusmeiro Petit are free agents, and there are no indications that they're going to come back to the Athletics. And they already saw Joakim Soria go to the Diamondbacks. The Athletics had a great bullpen last year. It got them into the playoffs. But it was getting decimated this offseason. Adding Kolarek goes a long way towards fortifying it. Kolarek's a lefty. They only have two lefty relievers, Jake Diekman and TJ McFarland. Jake Diekman is a really good pitcher. He could close for the Athletics in this coming season. Either him or J.B. Wendelken. TJ McFarland is completely useless. Never really liked him that much. Let's say Wendelken is the closer for the Athletics. You've got Kolarek and Diekman as your two lefties in the bullpen. Yeah, I'm excluding TJ McFarland. Like I said, he's useless. That's scary. That makes for a very scary bullpen. Cody Thomas is really a nobody. You don't need to know anything about him. Too old to be considered a prospect. Has never played in the majors. Don't worry about him. As for who the Athletics gave up, though, Sheldon Neuse has talent. In limited time with the Athletics in 2019, he hit .250 with 7 RBIs. He's a defense-first third baseman. Decent power, not great. If he's going to make it in the majors, it's going to be as a late-inning defensive replacement. No one's going to be mistaking him for Adrian Beltre anytime soon. Gus Varland is a very deceptive pitcher. You don't know what he's going to throw at you. Does a very good job of disguising his pitches. He throws 3 pitches. A fastball, a slider, and a still-in-progress changeup. But he does a really good job of keeping hitters off balance. That's a lost art nowadays. It wouldn't surprise me if Varland turned into a solid back end of the rotation starter. But it's more likely than not that he's gonna become a long reliever type. Sort of like Luis Sessa. All in all, this is an even trade. The Athletics fortified their bullpen, which they rode to the playoffs last year. They weren't going to do that this year. Now they can. Kolarek is very talented. And the Dodgers got some solid prospects in Neuse and Varland. In fact, with Justin Turner still being a free agent, there's a path open for Neuse to be the Dodgers' starting third baseman on opening day. And Varland could turn into a solid pitcher for the Dodgers. This is an even trade. Alright, now I'll give you some college basketball Valk talk. And I'll start with yesterday's upset. That really wasn't an upset because Minnesota was favored, but Purdue was the ranked team. Regardless of how you want to look at it, Minnesota beat Purdue 71-68. This was a really, really good game. Very competitive. Neither team was able to pull away tooth and nail all throughout. Like, I'll tell you, I was watching this game, like, half paying attention to it. Then as it got going, I really got into it. These are two very talented teams. Is this a bad loss for Purdue? It is in the sense that they're now going to be unranked, but they lost to a good Minnesota team. There's not much to be ashamed of there. Both of these teams are probably going to make the big dance. And both of these teams showed why yesterday. Both teams had their big guns show up. Trevion Williams, very talented player, was the high man for both teams with 24 points. Eric Hunter had 14 points. Off the bench, the big man, Zach Edey, had 13 points. He's going to be a handful in the tournament. But the Golden Gophers were just the more well-rounded team yesterday. Marcus Carr had 19 points. Gabe Kalsher had 16. Brandon Johnson had 15. And Liam Robbins had a double-double. 11 points and 10 rebounds. He also had 4 blocks. This game did have a very interesting end to it, though. I'll fast forward a little bit. Marcus Carr has just hit a big three-pointer under a minute left. The Boilermakers get the ball inside to Trevion Williams. Everyone knew the ball was going to him. The guy had 2 opportunities to make a layup. Couldn't do it. Got his own rebound twice. The third try, thunderous dunk. Marcus Carr then gets fouled to tie the game at 66. Again, ball inside to Trevion Williams. He makes the turnaround jumper. 68-66, Boilermakers. Marcus Carr has the ball under 20 seconds left. Everyone's thinking he's going to wait to make his move. We know he's taking this shot. He drains a 3 to make it 69-68 Golden Gophers. Ice in the veins. Trevion Williams then travels. It was the right call. Gabe Kalsher got fouled, made his 2 free throws. Then there was this weird inbound. Minnesota ended up tipping the ball out of bounds. It was a baseball-type pass. It worked for an advancement. Sasha Stefanovic, who was invisible in this game, really should have shown up. He's why Purdue lost. Had the ball in his hands to try to tie the game at 71. He couldn't do it. I really hope you were watching this game. If you weren't, you missed a great game. But now it's time to preview this weekend's 3 games that feature 2 ranked teams. And I'll start with Oklahoma, West Virginia. Firstly, let me just say this about West Virginia. When I talked about him before, I mentioned Oscar Tshiebwe like he was still on the team. He's going to Kentucky. He transferred out of WVU. I said his name without thinking about it. I'm sorry. That was just bothering me. I'm not going to spend much more time on WVU because I spoke about him this week. Not much has changed with them. If you want to hear my take on him, go back to Tuesday's show where I said that they would beat Texas Tech, and I was right. So instead I'll talk about Oklahoma. A team that I've talked about before, but it's been a minute since I have. They're a very well-rounded team. They can kill you offensively, and they can kill you defensively. Give Lon Kruger a ton of credit for what he's done with the Sooners. Oklahoma is primarily a football school. It always will be. But they're a really good basketball school now, too. They have 5 players who you really need to key in on. Austin Reeves, Davion Harmon, and Brady Manek. They're all averaging over 10 points a game. They're capable of going off on any given night. Umoja Gibson off the bench is a really good 6th man. And Elijah Harkless is one of my favorite players in the nation. Incredibly talented defensively. He reminds me a lot of Lou Dort when I watch him play. I think he has a bright future in the NBA. This game is at WVU. Oklahoma has beaten WVU this year, but that was in Norman. I don't see them sweeping this really good WVU team. I do expect guys like Miles McBride, Derek Culver, Taz Sherman, and Sean McNeil to go off tomorrow. This isn't Press Virginia anymore, but they're still a really good school. It wouldn't stun me if the Sooners won, but I'm going to go with the Mountaineers. Moving on now to Villanova-Creighton. A matchup between 2 almost identical teams. This year, the Wildcats are averaging 79.1 points per game. That's the 41st best mark in the nation. You know how many points the Blue Jays are averaging per game? 78.8. That's the 44th best mark in the nation. Defensively, Villanova's averaging 67.6 points against. That's the 110th best mark in the nation. Creighton, 69.1 points against per game. That's the 155th best mark in the nation. Both of these teams have 5 guys who can go off on any given night. Nova has Jeremiah Robinson Earl, Colin Gillespie, Justin Moore, Caleb Daniels, and Jermaine Samuels. One of the best starting lineups in the nation. Cole Swider also has talent as a 6th man. Creighton's almost the same. Denzel Mahoney, Marcus Zagorowski, Damian Jefferson, Christian Bishop, and Mitch Ballack with Ryan Kalkbrenner as their 6th man. You'd be hard-pressed to find a more symmetrical matchup than this one between Jay Wright and Greg McDermott's squads. I mean, I'm struggling to pick a winner here. I do think Nova's the better team, but this game is in Omaha, and I think they're going to have fans in the stands. If you put a gun to my head, I'd probably say that Villanova's going to win, but it wouldn't stun me in the slightest if Creighton won. In fact, I'll say that if the spread is 3.5 or higher, take Creighton. I'm sure Creighton's going to be the underdog. But take Creighton plus 3.5, plus 4, plus 4.5, whatever the spread is. If it's over 3, take Creighton. The last matchup to talk about is Michigan taking on Wisconsin. Michigan is one of my favorite teams this year. I love watching them play. I love what Juwan Howard has done with the program. They are one of the most well-rounded teams in the nation. They have a really good starting lineup. Hunter Dickinson, one of the best centers in the nation. Isaiah Livers, who has improved tremendously throughout his time at Michigan. Franz Wagner, I'm pretty sure he's Mo's brother. Don't quote me on that, though. Eli Brooks, very capable defender. And Mike Smith, who's a lethal three-point shooter. He should get more opportunities from beyond the arc. Off the bench, their sixth man is Chaundee Brown, a lethal scorer, one of the best sixth men in the nation. Wisconsin wins their games primarily through their excellent defense. They've only given up just under 62.5 points per game. That's the 19th best mark in the nation. And that's because of guys like Demetric Trice, Nate Roivers, Brad Davison, Jonathan Davis, and Tyler Wall. I'd be remiss, though, if I didn't mention Micah Potter. The guy's averaging 11.8 points per game and 6.1 rebounds per game. He's the second best Badger offensively. The best Badger offensively is Trice. Even though Wisconsin has an excellent defense, I don't think they're going to be able to stop this excellent Wolverines offense. How can you? I understand that this team hasn't played since January 22nd. And this isn't a great matchup for them in Wisconsin to resume their season with, but I do think Michigan is the more talented team. I loved watching them before their impromptu break. And you know what? I think I'm going to go back to really enjoying watching them play. Give me Michigan. Brooklyn Nets show comes your way Monday night. Regular episodes of the Jacob Valk show come your way every weekday afternoon. Until next time, I am Jacob Valk saying that Philadelphians would boo the crack in the Liberty Bell.